when there is an Environment Day function, it is all about talk. And I'm very happy that Matthew organized this, because I feel very strongly that the time has come for us to act. So preaching must move to practice now. And I think that is what the Green School program embodies. When we at CSC thought about how we would like to work with schools, one of the things that I feel we needed to do was to get children to understand what it is to practice a different lifestyle. We talk a lot about environment. We talk about no plastic, we talk about water, we talk about it. We have big words for it even. Some words that nobody can even understand. But when we start practicing it, and most importantly, when we can measure the change that we are practicing, that changes mindsets. It changes the way children will learn to behave in a far more responsible way than certainly my generation has. And that is why the Green School program is so powerful. To explain it to you, Professor Kurian, what we do in the Green Schools program is that each school takes on an environmental audit of its own environmental performance. And you measure from rainwater to wastewater, to how much garbage you generate, to how children come to school, to what is the size of the school, exactly the question that you asked, how ventilated is it, how much energy does the school use. And you do that in a way that children learn both the science of environment, and they also learn to measure the change. So, for instance, one of the chapters in Green School is to do with water. Now, when it comes to water, the question is, what is the water that you can augment in your own area? Big question for India. How do you increase the amount of water we have? How do we do that? Is firstly to learn to measure, to value each raindrop. So the first thing the school does is to start measuring what is the land area of the school, what is the roof area of the school. Then the question of maths comes in. How do you calculate how much water can you recharge? So you start looking at your rainfall, you look at the area, you look at the recharge potential of your land, and then you come up with what is that amount of rain that you can recharge. Then the big question comes is, are you doing enough? That then starts the audit to begin to say, what can I do? How much can I recharge more? Can I take the roof water from this part of the school and take it and improve my groundwater? But the audit doesn't finish there. The audit only starts there. Because after you've done that, you start measuring the change. You start measuring that when I recharge my groundwater, did my water table go up or did it go down? And that also matters because you can recharge as much as you want. You can be the country's highest rainfall region, as it is in Cherrapunji. You can still have a water drought. Because the question is not just how much you recharge. The question is how much you use. So that becomes the second part of the audit question, which children ask. So how much water do I need to use for my essential purposes? Now that's when we start understanding that actually human beings use very little water for essential functions. You drink 2 liters of water, maximum 3 liters of water. You use another 2 liters of water if you want for cooking. You use the maximum in terms of flush, but if you can reduce and make your flush more efficient, you can reduce your water also for waste disposal. So that becomes part of learning the environmental challenge, but also looking and practicing the solutions and then measuring. Measuring, measuring, measuring. You have to measure what you do and how much you can improve. And that's another part of the schools that have been with us for many years. And I feel very excited when I see schools coming back and saying, see, last year we scored 60% marks. But this year we've actually improved our marks because this year we have done even more. We have either recharged more water or we have done better on waste management. So one big issue in waste is learning what do you actually use. And the most fascinating things I've seen when schools come back and say, oh, children in our audit team actually took apart everything we get into school and they measured how much biodegradable waste, how much non-biodegradable waste, how much plastic do we get, how much plastic can we reduce, how can we reduce the non-biodegradable component of it, how can I compost the compostable part. Again, that changes the way we do things. So the Green Schools program really is, in my view, a change agent. It allows children not to talk about environment, but actually to practice it. And my dream is that each one of your schools, and I'm hoping that the Church of South India will stay with this program, and that each one of your schools will become the model school in terms of how green it is, how it is practiced it, not preached it only, but practiced it. Because that is the best way to preach. To change the way we do things is the best way to be able to educate the future generations, educate children of the potential and the possibility of doing things differently. I am disappointed when I read the booklet that few schools have only completed the audit. And I would really like Matthew to discuss this with my colleagues at CSC to see how we can improve the performance, Matthew, I was saying. The booklet says schools, not all schools completed the audit. And you also say that it was a little difficult to complete it. So let's work that out. Let's improve it. It will also help us to improve ourselves, to make it more usable. But please stay with this. It's very important. Because Professor Kurian talked about climate change. And I would like to say, we don't have to wait for 2 degrees. Climate change is happening today. Today, when you read about extreme weather events, and please be clear, we are getting the most extreme rainfall events today. When we are tracking the rainfall in the country, we are finding that the moderate events are going down. That what you are getting is extreme events. You saw what happened in Mumbai a few days ago. You see what happens again and again and again. You are getting rainfall of a whole year in a matter of a few hours. That is extreme weather events that climate models predicted would happen. You're beginning to get extreme heat. The dust storms that are happening and are killing people across North India are also because of climate change, because you're getting changes in weather between the western disturbances, between the fact that it's drier and more intense heat means more dust. And therefore when the storm comes, the law of physics says the force will be higher. Because the amount of dust on the ground is what the wind picks up, and the force of the storm, therefore, is life-taking. How many of us in our years remember the fact that dust storms have killed people to the extent that we have seen this year? But remember, climate change is happening today, and its biggest victims are the poorest, the most marginalized, the people who have not contributed to climate change. In fact, I think the biggest immorality of the world has to be the fact that the poorest today are worst impacted because of the excesses of the rich. The rich in the developed world and now rich across the developing world. We are all contributing through the emissions, as Professor Kurian so correctly put, because of our emissions and the stock of greenhouse gases, in the atmosphere, which has already increased temperatures close to 1.5 degrees. And there is no way, given the presence of President Trump in the United States, and given the fact that the entire world is so fossil fuel addicted, that we will not reach 2 degrees centigrade. But remember, when at 1.5 degrees we are seeing this kind of devastation, what confronts us should really make us extremely worried. The trouble also is, and this is the third issue that I wanted to talk about, is that it is not so simple. When I say that there were floods in Chennai, and that was because of intense rainfall, which is true, and that we are beginning to see more and more extreme rainfall, that is also true, and that this is linked to climate change, that's a fact. But it is also a fact that Chennai suffered from the worst floods because Chennai destroyed its own water bodies. It destroyed its own drainage systems so that when the water comes, it would have a place to be able to recharge, to be able to flow, and then slowly recharge the groundwater. So in each case of what you can call today not a natural disaster, but an unnatural disaster, I would argue with you that this is a man-made disaster. And I'm deliberately using the word man and not woman. This is a man-made disaster which is confronting us today. On one hand, because of the emissions in the atmosphere, which is leading to extreme weather changes. On the other hand, because of what we are doing ourselves to destroy the environment. But what this tells us is that the time for games is over. The luxury of making mistakes is over. The fact is, climate change will bring more devastation. If we want to deal with that devastation, then we learn to live an environmentally sustainable life. We better learn to do development in a way that it is environmentally sustainable. And this is so important to be able to impart and to be able to explain how we need to push the envelope so that we can do something much more. And this is why we need to be able to explain to children as well that all this talk about plastic is not at all working. That we are today, and plastic to me is a symbol of the kind of problem that we are creating. Remember, plastic is like carbon dioxide. It is like CFC, which has led to the ozone layer depletion. Why? Because mankind, and again I'm using the word mankind, because if in this case you will also see all the inventions have always been done by men in this case. Mankind is very proud of these inventions because these were the life-changing inventions of the world. They were seen to be dramatic. They were seen to be, if you read all the textbooks, you will see that whether it is DDT, whether it is CFC, whether it is plastic, whether it is carbon dioxide, we essentially have celebrated these, saying that these were breakthrough inventions because for once we found a material that could not be destroyed. Remember, carbon dioxide lives in the atmosphere for 170 to 200 years. The problem is its age. It lives. It does not get destroyed. Creation is important, but so is destruction. But we created substances that we were so proud of, were so stable, that mankind could not destroy them. And that's the case of plastic. So we created a substance, again from fossil fuel. Plastic is from hydrocarbons, molecules of hydrocarbon, which have been made into a wonder substance because it cannot get decomposed. It is so stable, it is so durable that when and if mankind ever disappears, the sign of the Anthropocene is going to be plastic. That is what we are leaving behind, our legacy. This is the Anthropocene. Our legacy is plastic. So today, we sleep on plastic. That's what we have for our mattresses. We eat on plastic. We pay cash. We pay money using plastic. We are sitting on plastic. We package everything in plastic. Our plastic, thankfully, I'm not seeing plastic bottles here, so thank you very much. Wonderful. That is a very important thing to first get rid of. Okay? And this is cotton, it's not flex, so another very good mark. Okay? Very important. But remember, we have literally made plastic. It's part of our lives today. We talk about the cell phone and we say, oh, how will I ever do without the cell phone? Actually, the substance that we absolutely live with, including clothes today, they're all plastic. And remember, when it comes to plastic, let me give you some bare facts. From 1950 to 2015. 1950 is when large-scale plastic production began in the world. To 2015, the world has generated 8.3 billion tons of plastic. 8.3 billion tons. Of the 8.3 billion tons, 6.3 billion tons is plastic waste. Okay? It's around roughly 80%. But what is even worse is that of that 6.3 billion tons of plastic waste that we have generated, only 9% of that plastic waste has been recycled. And 10% of that 9% has been recycled twice. Only 9% has been recycled in the entire world. And another 12% has been incinerated. Because the only way you can actually get rid of plastic, being so stable, is by burning it. But remember, every time you burn plastic, if you don't have emission control systems that are very expensive emission control systems, your problem goes from plastic to dioxin in the air. Both bad. So let's understand the numbers. 9% of the total plastic generated in the world has been recycled. And when you talk about recycling, and I talk about recycling, and we want to increase recycling, remember one other fact, that till now, we recycle, we downcycle, which means every time I take plastic and I make another product out of it as a recycling product, I essentially make it of lower value and lower quality. Which means that after I have recycled it once, at some point I will still dispose it off. So I have delayed the disposal. Even though recycling is so important, I have delayed the disposal of it. So at the end of the day, what we have to talk about when it comes to plastic is, how do we do without it? Because all the solutions we have today are not working. And today, in fact, the irony of it is, I was stunned when I saw the United Nations UNEP was celebrating a no plastic day. I said, why should they care about plastic? I mean, they have removed the litter from their streets. They don't have a plastic problem. Remember, the reason the world is today worried about plastic is that they have found that all the plastic plastic that is being generated by them, by us, by everyone, is some way making it into water bodies. And the one thing that happens with plastic is that the use of water fragments it. It does not destroy it, it fragments it. That is what is called microplastic. And today, in 90% of the drinking water samples in the United States, they have found microplastic. Worse, more and more samples of fish across the world are being found with microplastic. So the cycle has closed. We dumped the plastic into the ocean. The fish ate the plastic, we ate the fish. That is why the world today is realizing that plastic is a very serious problem. But unfortunately, the world is still looking for very small answers. So what has Wimbledon done? They have banned plastic straws. But what the Parliament has done, in the UK Parliament has done, is actually to go a little further to say all single-use plastic has been banned now in the UK Parliament. But clearly what we need is some more drastic answers. But we need to start at least acknowledging that we need to reduce the amount of plastic. We need to break our relationship with this so-called most durable substance. And at the end, therefore, what I want to say at this World Environment Day is that what the plastic story tells us is that if we don't do things differently, if we don't think differently, if we still think that we can still consume, we can still keep using, and that as long as we can either recycle our waste or we can somehow deal with it by cleaning it up, we are okay. We are not okay. We will have to find ways, exactly as the Bishop said, exactly as Professor Kurian said, we have to find ways to minimize use. We have to change lifestyle so that we use less, we tread lightly on earth. And this is where, in my view, the biggest change in India is happening. And it's not happening because of the rich of this country. It is happening because of the poor of this country. Because for so long we have said, not in my backyard. But my backyard, when it's not in my backyard, it's in the backyard of the poor. I mean, which prime minister of which country has a nuclear plant in his backyard? Which Luton's Delhi has a thermal power plant in Luton's Delhi? It's always in somebody else's backyard. Of course, in Kerala, it's not in my backyard, it's not in my constituency. But that's part of the challenge. But what is happening today is when the poor of this country, the less powerful, are beginning to say, not in my backyard. The most exciting movement that I find, and I've written about it, I got the current minister or the past minister, who's now the vice president, to actually give away an award to Alleppey and to Trivandrum city, because there the villagers have said, the rural areas of the cities have said, not in my backyard. Now when rural areas say, you cannot dump your waste in my backyard, the question becomes, whose front yard then? And that's when change will happen. So if you give power, you give voice to the poor in whose backyard we have been doing all the devastation till now. If they get the voice to say, not in my backyard, it brings change. So whether it's in Alleppey, whether it's in Trivandrum, whether it is in many cities now in India, even in my city of Delhi, wherever they are looking for a waste dump, people are saying, not in my backyard. Earlier on, Delhi could go and build all its waste dumps in Ghazipur, Okhla, Wazirpur, all the outlying areas of Delhi, where the poor of Delhi live. But today, even the poor of Delhi have a voice, and they're saying, not in my backyard will you build another waste dump. Now what that has done in at least Alleppey, Thiruvananthapuram and many other cities is this not in my backyard coming from the backyard of the poor means that the will have to do things differently. In this case, they have to compost, they have to do segregation at home, they have to compost, and the best thing that the government of Kerala has done is to put on the website the names and addresses of all the scrap dealers so that you can take your non-biodegradable waste to the scrap dealer for further recycling. We need to improve these systems. But the bottom line is that when you start understanding that the backyard of someone else has to be your front yard, that's when change will come. And when we give voice to people who are worst impacted by environmental degradation, when we give them a voice, when we give them the power to say no, then I believe we will make the change that is required. So once again, thank you so much for doing all you do in the Green Schools program. Please stay with it, please push it, please work with us, and we very much look forward to making change agents grow, multiply and blossom. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great, doctors.